yin me do dang zhi rao lin jian ba di san jie xin du mi di yi zhou gen nang da xin che ba xiu yi deng men zhe la gang ni ya ya mi我在那对这写你不你单纯给他们也别写我，他媳妇做呢，咱写着去你主办来谁干？他等这样了就你跟他夸苦就这么送我的是吧？媳妇做呢，咱写着去你主办来，没人主办样是其实是，你对这那么送不样。我们对些看人吧，了解他个主要就是谁，他怎么听嘛不要的是吧？还是不得讲啊，就是谁个，刚说的，嘛是直播样式是对这那把送播样式，嘛是直播样式其实是呢，他看上看你可以说呢，他妈没人把钱，没人比，但是俺那去年那时候就他们没人把。对个，那路通完了，直把印章，没人直白是。那路通完了，直把印章，俺那样式了四百斤，俺那四百斤，俺那军人斤，俺那你话对这个来是，俺那啥个话的是没人直把样式，其实对这那把孙不样是，你话对这个来啥个话的是，你话对这个来的了，俺那对这那把孙不样是一个了，俺那说能给外来。跟着这些个说能给外来当，俺那按照这些个说能马英把没给外来当，看我们的这些个，俺那他没有外来晒的，那都是嘛送过来的，马这只把样式去，对象那把送不样式，我把对象看外来的他个抓谁看对象那把送不的3年，俺那来这个，俺那爬山那么些都跟那。印度跟你，俺那抓台上提，他不爬下哥嘛，他就干了，俺那具体经常学钱，俺那爬下提给，俺那所有当年，俺那给我样式起码给我人就干了，俺那样式起码给嘛他把的，那么写的了，俺那这对经常学钱去，他都说过的，是吧？那。
So here, where we had left off in the text, it ended by saying that this path of dependent origination is the essence of all the teachings of the Buddha. And then here, if one is to lay this out in detail from the 26th chapter of the Fundamental Root Verses on Wisdom by Nagarjuna, it begins with this line from ignorance, but being obscured by ignorance, one again takes rebirth. And this actually continues through the next 8 verses. And so here, this is explaining the 12 links of dependent origination, and by which, the reversal of which one is able to reverse that process of taking rebirth in samsara. So among the 12 links of dependent origination, the first of these, the beginning, is ignorance. And so because ignorance obscures us with respect to the way that things are, it is due to this ignorance then that we engage in karma, that we create karmic activities, those sort of meritorious activities that will lead to a rebirth in the upper realms and a happier migration, those non-meritorious karmas that will lead to a birth in the lower realms, and unmoving karmas that lead to birth in the form and formless realm. So on the basis of this ignorance, which then causes us to engage in karma, which then leaves imprints, sort of sullies or leaves an imprint on our consciousness, and it is that consciousness which then there is this link of consciousness can be divided into the sort of causal consciousness as well as the resultant consciousness. So it is by leaving these impressions upon the causal consciousness, which then ripen into the experiences that we have, that one cycles through samsara. So here, this section from the Root Verses on Wisdom, the 26th chapter, is explaining the way in which the 12 links of dependent origination propel us by this obscuration of ignorance to take rebirth in samsara.
Oh yeah. Anita Kasore Maribu Pacha Tela, Asilani Chisotami. And it's a no Chisota, Jabaseba, and Gualemba, Sotamne, Ani Pachaki, Leguniba Tujandu Tude. Ani, oh, Caso, Lea Gama Taba, Jisi Trubala, Ondo Chomi, Legaptela, Ani Sibi Dandesha, Juasiba. Sibi Dende Tegi, any Jesu Trubala, Ondo Chovi, any Tegi Negaso, any or Tajishua Nashi said, Yasichima Yenzam Jarwa, Dama Tabata, Namishi Ki. But Namshi Dendeki, Yasichima Yamba Jadigan, Nabashiava, Shujuna, Segana, and 제가 가르랭가 되지나 이마게 도지 랭가 되지나 미도지나 안 파묘 쿠라기 있어 남바시와 슈시 파미지 남바시와 슈준 다들 파스 두고와 다들 요아리 망부지와리 다다 가제 남바시와 슈준나 남바시와 슈준나 아니 남시게 땡데당 미수지 지리비 땡데 주바 되냐 임바래 미수 남바시와 슈준나 민다수네 차바치르스 민다수의 산은 안에 제제주 미제제 나의 제제 전에 제제주 그때인데 제제 민다수 제제주네 전화된 제제주 제라 안에 리비던데 다도 좀 주고 와래 미도 리비던데 안에 쳐야 된대 어두 시간 리바 쳐와 다세바단 렘바데 내가 야채 타지야 치자라와 데이터라 안에 가시 된데 두고와 인자 민다 순이 차준에 계제 준이 중화지 계제 준에를 봐 민다 순다 남지스 숨보디와 칸인 바다 요한 남시 숨 디와라 때네 아니 리비텐데 주베 리비텐데 그 안에 소비텐데 어두시 제가 다 담불을 심어가체 말이 디바 양세 제시와네 바시보드 중화 주로세 가나 안에다 매수 개와 어디가 시대에 바디 알아 주니 바두스마 말이 디바 양세 제시와네 바시보드 중화 주로세 바디 아니 논중 그때도 주듯이 논중
가래
논중 Lule chua maribala tena tuche la tena ane
no. So here, then, in these verses, it is establishing, presenting a presentation of the 12 links of dependent origination. So it is due to having this cause of ignorance, which causes us to then engage in karmas, create actions, which then put down an imprint on the consciousness. And then when we actually take up another rebirth, when we are connected with another life, then those become actualized in taking on a name and form and the 6 sense bases and so forth. The effect consciousness arises along with name and form, and then this leads to the rest of the links of dependent origination. So the ignorance that one has that leaves these impressions upon one's consciousness that then ripen into the various effects. This establishes existence, which is actually the 10th link of dependent origination. And then on the basis of that, birth and aging and death are the effects that are actualized by this. So it's the effect consciousness is established at the same simultaneously with name and form when one takes actually takes a rebirth. And then it is from having the development of the sources, bases of our various senses, and through that coming into contact with objects, we have the link of contact, which then leads to feeling, which then leads into grasping or clinging, and then grasping, which propels us to continue in this cycle, having to take existence, then birth and aging and death. And so all of this comes only from this cycle. So here, these 12 links of dependent origination describe the way in which one is forced to cycle through samsara, that due to having ignorance, and that ignorance placing these imprints down on our consciousness, that one is then forced to continually take rebirth. So here in the 26th chapter of the Root Verses on Wisdom, it describes the sort of way that these various links of dependent origination work in a cycle to then cause us to keep taking rebirth.
Jua Sibani, and it's Sibalani Java Jones. Sibala Dana, and or Yasishamani, the Java Java Chung, Sibali Juchera, Sibatella Casashuana, Mache, Kashi, Sibata, Pumongache, Sibashi, and the Sibatan Sibayana, and then Yanni Wanga in Jam Jam. Sibayana. 18名啦，2年往个1站没着，我1站站没做吧，就做我其他的差个我的是然后这里是这位接受，那个搞戏，搞啊他戏啊他，是搞说是，这我那个搞戏他呢，两岸党、缅甸的党、东亚党、伊美的党、朱巴党，伊美的党、朱巴党。 아니 바시보데 중화주로 이미 다 투바다 아니 바시보데 중화주로 제자 도시체 되게 아니 다단지 루준도 권배 고마다 때네 다 마리바기니와 토네 동아지 나주 산네 다 룬도 거야 되라 되니 다 바시보데 중화시 바세이 바지 루준게 땡게당
No. So then, on the basis of having existence of this the 10th link of dependent origination, this establishes the 5 aggregates that one has to take up the aggregates. So if you have existence, then you will necessarily take a rebirth, have to be born, and then having been born, one is subject to aging and death. And so this establishes that if one has this link of existence that is brought about by the preceding links, one then establishes that one is going to have to take a birth, and because of that birth, be subject to all of the various kinds of sufferings that come. So it is on the basis of these links of dependent origination that all sort of suffering and misery is established, that one having created all of the causes to then take to have existence, one then is propelled to take birth, and having taken up a body and taken birth, one is then subject to all of the various types of suffering, including aging and death, and has to recycle in samsara. So here, by thinking about the manner of dependent origination, the way in which these links proceed, one comes to understand both the way in which one, by having ignorance, one will go forward in this cycle of samsara, and also the process of reversing these links of dependent origination.
Oh yeah. Then that Lundo Gasu, Kandasigore, and I know call you Zawa Dujete, Serigana, Zawa Maripi, one Gunalande, and then you were Dujegile, the Sago in Zang, call you Zawa Tintin Dujete. Tini Kanam Dumeshi, teaching me get chebo you, carry Tini Gombe so, Serigana, or call you Zan Duchebo de Carre, Tini Karen Dumeshi, Kawa, the Bangosum to Tomwagi, and Maribi Wangi, you were to check less of your money, that Taran so much. 테니카나 두메시 거기 자원 되지 테니카나 두지 되지 미게 제보에 개발되니 통지로서 일단 코와 저와 번역이 내대 상근데 가려서 미게 봐 미게 봐 대방무슨도 마동와기 싸고 와라 대방무슨도 통치제라 내서봐 되지 미게 제보에 개발되니 가서래 이와 되지게 내면서저 개발되니 통지로 어디서 그래 가요 거기 자와 되지 되니 미가 제보에 되니 캐나 되지 미가 제보에 개발되니 통지로
So then here, this explains the sort of method of the links of dependent origination. And here, this begins another quotation that says that the root of samsara, and then it has karmic formations. So due to having this root of ignorance, one then creates karmic formations, and this causes one to have to cycle into in samsara. But by seeing the truth directly, then one is able to stop that cycle. If one does not have this ignorance, because it is counteracted by the truth of seeing reality as it is, then one does no longer does one create karma, which then causes one to have to engage in all of these links. So here, the first section of the passage quoted from Nagarjuna is dealing with the sort of system of how one engages in samsara, the links of engaging in samsara. And those are explained by first the root of ignorance, causing one to create karmic formations, which then lead to taking rebirth and so forth. But if one stops that completely, then one is able to reverse those links of dependent origination. And so by not having ignorance, one no longer creates karma and therefore no longer cycles with these 12 links.
Oh yeah. Mari gaba juwani deje namgu jume jurusi. Yana junye nanjade juwe tome mari bade gana ane tiyu kunya laba glesa bade gaba yenza mari gaba juwani deje namgu namgu jume jurusi. Mari gaba juwani shewe tini gombe so sire ane mari gaba de karir tena gomba re sana ane shewe tini gomba so sire yuji nelu tadu ane ba chidawa shindu shewa ki ane lo tegi gomba da tena ane mari gaba juwa 아니 말이 가봐주면 세배 테니 공부해서 대단 테니 남가나 가다 말이 가봐주면 세배 테니고 말이 가봐주면 세배 대단 테니 나 강가네 아니 다 야라주니 뭐 가봐주 대단 테니 대단야 안다 가서 말이 가다 또 두서다를 마치도 다 그래서 말이 가봐주면 세배 테니 말이 대단 테니 나 간다 진짜 다워 근데 진짜 대들이 좀 맞서 대다 테니 안다 가 스타일 나마나마 가발라 테네 중나마나마 가발라 테네 아니 더 치마치마 메종 왔다 됐은 거래.
So if one is then able to stop this first link of dependent origination, to eliminate that ignorance which motivates one to then engage in karma and so forth, by stopping that first link, then one is able to stop the entire cycle of these 12 links of dependent origination. So by understanding the way that things are, by this wisdom recognizing the actual nature or reality of things, one is able then to uproot that ignorance, to counteract that ignorance, such that none of the links that follow after that will come. So if one is able to then stop the first cause, then none of the rest of those causal links will come about. So by stopping ignorance, by seeing reality as it is, by recognizing and generating this kind of awareness, by actually cultivating it and meditating on it, one is finally able to overcome that ignorance that is the root cause of all of this. So each of the subsequent links is then stopped or prevented just by preventing that first cause from arising. So this again comes in these verses where Nagarjuna is describing now the links, or sort of the way in which the links of dependent origination are stopped. And so by removing ignorance, this fundamental cause, then none of the rest of the links of dependent origination can come into being. So by identifying that cause and removing it, then one is able to stop this cycling.
Oh yeah. 아제를 파기에서 단단데 라지 니주바기 안에 단데야라 주니 다바가 라지나 니주바기 전다데다 대송과래 개발잖아 대다 되는 양다가 제위 파기 룬도게 단데 숨베탄 마리바 가바라 두체 가바 안에 아마아마 가바 안에 량이 그 개와 가야게 오 룬도게 단데 숨베탄 세계 당부의 초지도 주바 인배 당부들이 초지도 주바 인배 라제 니주바 다대 초제 당부의 가대선한데 지보 단대도 바그 세계 당부의 강강见了라라 바 대대랑시 기도시 숨바텔라 예산배 내좀 중이 지시해 세대 다 빠져대 저인지 지바 힘에 랍진이 지부 도단제베 텐디 안에 디셰바요 그래서 세나다 안에 랍진이 지바 차상기 안에 루용기 와가 깨와 연주당 루도가 와가 깨와로 도주되다 안에 도시 디나라 차상 뒤샤네 와레스
이제 당보디
랍진 가르세 세제 당보디스 가서 세제 당보디스 예수미 세제 당보디 초지도 주바 인배들 세제 당보 어제
구바 지네바디 직전 구바 지네바디르베
가세 세제 당보디 니네 된다데 단지도 막 세제 당보디 단지도 막 세제 당보 강간견라라레바 대대랑신 치도시 숨바텔라 야자비 레좀 소리 치시 근데 내려와 대도 권이 대비 권이 치시 대비 권이 치시 또 가서 대디 인지를 가서 내 가하나 저라고 됐으면 되나 단단히 저와 주마이 단지 저와 주마 절대는 같이 되면 진짜 공부시면 대단한 데 되는 저와 수랑 와자 저와 지 강강견라라라 바 대대랑시 기도 숨바텔라 야잔비 내좀 주니 지시 사고티나라다 되죠 그래서는
So here then the verses in the root fundamental wisdom by Nagarjuna here explain in detail and more in detail the stages of engaging in these 12 links of dependent origination, as well as the stages of stopping those 12 links. So if one removes the first cause, if you no longer if you stop ignorance, then you stop creating karmic formations, which then lead to one having to take rebirth due to karma. And so by understanding that by stopping this first link of dependent origination, then one is able to stop the entire cycling within samsara. And so here it says then this can be sort of applied to the meaning of the first verse here, but that's actually referring to then the fifth verse, the first verse of this topic. And so here it says, whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this statement? And so all of the sort of intended meaning from the expanded verses of the root verses on wisdom by Nagarjuna, where he's explaining in detail each of these links and the way that they proceed, with the way that one engages in samsara, or the way that one is able to reverse those are all sort of contained within. It's suitable to explain this meaning together with this single verse here, again, that is, whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of yeah. Okay, we've got the verse figured out. I thought it was saying it was the first verse of the text, but here we're referring to this verse in this particular sapje or this section. So, whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this? And so all of the links of dependent origination, their way of being engaged and also reversed, are contained within that verse.
Oh yeah. Nirubati Dodanja was Shaba Yoso, also Titan Kubachenja. That then you be lam the netam what the Gatoman de days. Gataja Tishinila, Shoshin Bawa Shada in Bears. Jum then you choose to change Sumba Tamja, and you don't want you to reach to Sumba in Bears. The candidate on Sumba in Bear. 个他们就光别他都这样的人啦，是哦，个他们就光别他都这样，哦，等于当把等于当别天天人啦，是，咱们看了书讲，他把这把了过年话没办是。但年对党推荐党，人家就咱们看了书讲，他把这个过。 아니 대중 무슨 또 봐 대중 무슨 또 남들에 고니와 남이와야 매배 아니 시고 주보다 저봐 주빌라면 뒤에
So here, then, this teaching on this path of dependent origination here is really the essential point, the essential advice of the teachings. So all of the Buddha's teachings, all of the Buddha's speech were for the sake of disciples realizing emptiness. So all that the Buddha taught was for the sake of being able to realize emptiness. And here, all of his speech then comes to this single point. All of his speech has this final intention of recognizing dependent origination as the meaning of emptiness, and emptiness as the meaning of dependent origination. And so here, whatever sort of path one enters into, there is no second door leading to peace. There is no other way to get to the highest achievement, the liberation of that path, than through this teaching on emptiness. And so here it says then that this is without which one cannot proceed to liberation. So this is the only path, the single path to peace progressed by all of, whether one is practicing the Mahayana or is a hearer or a solitary realizer. In order to reach peace, to reach liberation, there is no other door or other pathway than this.
타도 광사도 대인라서 남 칸라치는 권이와 메바 인생스 던진 저와 주에 남디 대비 님보야 인데스 안에 산자가 대비 님보야 동바 던진을 되베 남디 인데스 장애지 도대 친예지 숨바 탐제 저 안에 던진 그라라 지세당 어다 가서래 던진 도베 치도 숨바당 대시도 숨바는 점단지지 취수 천예도 숨바탄제 된테나세 간에 숨바나지 가서 다여가 내세인이 소대라 동바시와 교와 매비초 미세반에 저와 참주바 대다 투쟁하에 탑주당 르바자다 근이 권한 주바제 세가라 취수 천예지 숨바 탐제 남바타베 고슴보저 또비치도 어느 성주래 사바지 말이라 주춤치 숨바래 디도에 가서 소환하시다 아니 가서 진주 가서야 야라디다 탐자니 투배시럽 텐도 송 소환하시지 야라디다 탐자니 투배시럽 텐도 송 가서 어점된데 아니 제주 숨바 가진 하마 송하당 하마 돈소야 돈이도 배시럽 투배시럽 숨바 임바 我顶上长个几多的前年就送把大家带用给咱们了，这些当当把你准备去银白，俺那对那些那么，俺那多的对那当， 안에 가서래 누이 되네라 써와 너대 시한남 안에 사무동마이 되면 어비 되네 되기 내다 보험 가라 주위 시다 보험 동바된중 또비 람디니 아니 어비 되니 그 제시做过着와 다 동바된중 되비 람디니 지다 보와 님거다 보 임비 셔를
So here, this is sort of the final intention of all of the Buddha's speech, this teaching on dependent origination. And so no matter what sort of path one enters into, there is no second door or pathway leading to liberation. And so other than this, because there is no second sort of path, this is the single door leading to peace and the single kind of path upon which one can traverse to liberation. And so this path of dependent origination is then the essence, the heart of the Buddha's teachings. And so here there is a quotation from the sutra demonstrating that all of the Buddha's teachings were taught for the sake of realizing dependent origination as emptiness and emptiness as dependent origination. The final sort of intention of all of the Buddha's teachings are to elicit this realization of emptiness, of the way that things are. So there's also a quotation at the beginning of the wisdom chapter in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where he says that all of these other branches were taught for the sake of wisdom. So here, the other branches referring to the perfections, the other perfections that were taught prior to the exposition on wisdom, all of those were taught for the sake of wisdom, for the sake of being able to realize this final wisdom. And so here it says then that whatever sort of sutras there are, classes of sutras, whether they are requiring interpretation or definitive, all of them are for leading one on this path of dependent origination and for ripening one's continuum to emptiness. And so all of the other sort of container, the baskets of the Buddha's teachings, this is like the foundation or the one that contains them all. It's sort of like the essence of all of them. So among the trainings on the Vinaya, the sutras and those texts dealing with higher knowledge, this is sort of the essence of the teaching of higher knowledge, but it contains all of the rest of the teachings, or sort of can be the container for them. And so here, this teaching, this path of dependent origination is referred to as the life of other paths as well.
오야 이것도 원인이 싫어서 내중기 남들이 너무 현지 쏟아보야 인데서 너무 현지 쏟아오 너니 도비 이세기 싫었단 차나但是咱们现在看出个什么？你接着说我太大给人讲框架，俺的他把专门的吧，他们这些他把他自己把专门吧，当你对比写了点面了，咱们现在他把他，咱们县他都是去把县当。讲究什么的？他这个他们这把专门的吧，没当茶话是吧？我对比告诉他，没路没不没把切话插下去，南阳没写，床前就把卡拉用，写了没嘛，没爬着去嘛，没不没把抢救是把就把没这一干了，弄嘛。弄这没把，你就卡说的，让跟对边那说专门的话当茶话，我也得，他把这把给没当茶话，专门没当茶话当。少当着话，你写多了样样的把顺便写了就把这去把那样，看起弄了那么的呢，没把抢救没把送，现在解决了送把拿去，看上去那么喜欢拿去现在，年纪上了老把对吧？咱写了就把这去把老把抢我个，这年纪上当，人家当。年纪他就不光帮他吧，人家就光帮，那你他把他吧，我天着记得蛮大了，太大了呀，俺多没写了歌吧，也得送完一阵的，那用给咱们的你特别关闭这些，我天的当的，写了当差吧，写多了样样顺便写的，呀，对吧？
So here, then again, it says that this is like the life force of other paths, this path of dependent origination, because other paths, like for example, compassion or bodhicitta, without having this wisdom realizing emptiness, are unable to lead us to liberation. So here, if one is devoid of this wisdom realizing emptiness, then there's no way that any other path can lead one to liberation. It's like being blind. There is a quotation that says that like a blind person who doesn't have the eyes of wisdom, they can't get to where they are trying to go. So in order to be able to achieve liberation, no matter how much one might have renunciation, compassion, bodhicitta, without these eyes of wisdom, you're unable to proceed to that goal. So similarly, this wisdom is likened to being like eyes, allowing us to see where we are going. And so Shanti Deva also expresses the same thing in saying that even for hearers and solitary realizers to achieve their sort of lesser enlightenment, they rely on this path of wisdom realizing emptiness. And without that, even they are not able to achieve their goals. And so here, this wisdom realizing emptiness is like the life force, like the eyes that allow us to see. Without this wisdom, one cannot even attain the enlightenment of a solitary realizer or a hearer. One absolutely has to have the wisdom realizing emptiness in order to gain liberation.
Oh yeah. Ani tenjung ge lam di ani tamba chacha tuba ge ani tuba ge gongbi na ge jie de yin ba de ani de dong ba ge xi ji yang de ge lo na yang de ge liu le ma ani liu le xie so xin我在的呢在写我吃过啊咸阳ani多你多比lam dan chan啊是他多你多比lam dan chan啊ani ne ta kon du xia ba na xi ni zhi zan ya bao men de ba 你这这样报名对吧？俺在酒吧上这个告诉，面对了，当把你到把药吧带了，当你到把药吧给，俺留下来了。我听说的，看说的，日本送到伦敦赛的，得送过赛的。现在当你对比南当站呢，俺也让你给你这这样报名对吧？就这了，日本送到伦敦就知道说，小娃瞧我在日本送的的。 你让这全把的他，俺哩看说的长生怕白，你让这全把的他日记关的事情那把你话他，是吧？日记谁呢？你话他话几钱？俺哩看说的，你让这全把看书记查见没办法，查见办法这边是吧？是吧？哦，今天提起了，就看说的。 这开始说的是啊，俺哩去一大堆这边单子跟他没多吧，去一大堆怎么样没多吧？我他都龙送都送过来的，日本送都是主要交的，他多吧有个给龙得那样，俺那龙轮起来他们三八他们学的龙单，三代编剧个龙单，他龙嘛不交的，他没去摸个去想，也让他当年多别咱们当站呢，你这这样报名的吧。 报名的吧，就别日本送钱，就这了，日本送到伦敦就日本说小娃瞧身上。
日本送的样样是不去，日本送的。
你让他准备给带来的，你让他就。 7月家좀强生사단 법에 7월 좀 신도 내란 다좀 받아 리지 권에 신이 왔다 내란 다좀 받고 돈이 맞도 비쳤어 돈이 다디요 그래서 야 다이 야 아니 제가 가지고
So here then, this is likened to being this wisdom realizing emptiness is likened to eyes or like the heart, the life force of the path. And so here this is said again and again in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras and so forth, likening this wisdom to being like the life force of the path. And so this is also the most sort of cherished intention of the sage, this path path of dependent origination. And so here from the particular chapter of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras that also articulates this, that this wisdom is what is like the life force or the most cherished intention of the sage. And so furthermore, it says that if one is devoid of this path of realizing emptiness, then one isn't even able to remove the afflictive obscurations. So this is explained then in the commentary on the Entry to the Middle Way, using 3 different reasonings and 7 different scriptures. It establishes this, that one, if one doesn't have this wisdom realizing emptiness, one is not even able to achieve the kind of liberation of a hearer or solitary realizer. One needs to, in order to even be able to remove the afflictive obscurations, one needs to have given rise to the wisdom realizing emptiness. And so Chandrakirti establishes this through 3 different reasonings about how non-Buddhists are unable to get to that kind of stage, and then also through 7 different scriptures, but those will come later.
자세사 담보 와대 예란 다좀 바대 아니 가서 리지고나 수준이 와타스 예란로 돈이 무슨 돈이 또 왔네 비슷해 근데 감성지 차지 마방마다 예란 다좀 감성지 아니 차지 마방마다 추이다면 무슨 또 비슷해 다 차비치르세 감성이 찾아서는 유모나스 거래. 저기다면 무슨 또 싫어다 잡히치르서. 아니 가서래. 아니 예란 다좀 바디기 가사 그다음에 천이 창와 마도 왔다스. 아니 저기다면 무슨 좀 마도 시세. 와. 어떻게 가사 그다음에 천이 창와 마도 왔다.
항상에 당미선
천이 창와 좀 마도 왔다. 다들 대주 용을 말이야. 야. 야. 이제다 接着下手呀，我这看见多年多比南当，常常年纪包明年包，就这了，这把什么的龙队就过呢，就把说笑话笑话，天呐！那得我们就比那个来话的，得他妈按照多少钱呢？这个我们光把它啥子？天呐，电视上面观念对吧？对比小一点。좀 니 태권을 좀 된데 좀 봐 현래 개발도 파괴 파괴는 하면 봐 인비 치당 산재 지대도 전부 거기 조야 대 인비 체를
So here we'll get to these 3 reasonings later that establish from the commentary on the Entry to the Middle Way by Chandrakirti. And so here then the praising the Buddha for his teaching on dependent origination is said to be the supreme form of praise, because this the Buddha alone realized, and this makes him superior to other teachers, to any other teacher. He is peerless or unexcelled. And so, and it is also the primary reason why the Buddha came to the world, was in order to teach dependent origination.
Oh yeah, that didn't translate. 他们出的是但头了，下桥我是他们，但就是没有关的，对吧？对比错音的。 안에 다 니고 니가라 또봐 좀 니니 좀 되는데 또봐 현래 개발도 파절하면 봐 인비 치당 산재 지대도 전부 거기 줘야 인비 치르스 다 또봐 현래 개발도 봐 파절하면 봐 인바도 투대 삼성의 시에서 치러 와라요 삼대의 수매증의 시에서 치러 와라요 바당 안에 찬다 배제 안에 가와 진진 배자와데 안에 스바타마와 자서사 주와 와라요와 스바타마 와라요바 참반예사당 양다 봉화시 주주 강바 시아 안봉아 동아 파라면라게 안에 창주야라 뒤我창주 소된데 안에 예라라야 요바 창주 소된 와 대신이 온도 전에 대니 땡중고 텐도 송바 네 대신이 온도 전에 대니 땡중고 텐도 송바 상자마도 봐라 매우 실 거야.
So then here there are these two sort of subtopics to why praising the Buddha for his teaching on dependent origination is the supreme form of praise. And first is that this Dharma of the Buddha is superior to any other sort of teacher. The Buddha alone realizes this. And then secondly, that this is the primary sort of reason why the Buddha came to the world, the primary purpose. And so the first of these is established, that the Buddha is superior to other teachers, because although sort of outsiders, non-Buddhists, are able to have the concentrations who have achieved the form or the formless realms and have various types of clairvoyances, those sorts of powers are shared even with those who are not Buddhists. And as far as the marks and the signs of a Buddha, there are worldly beings who also can have those kinds of marks and signs, beings who are still in samsara who have those marks and signs. And as far as the 37 sort of branches or factors of enlightenment, things like the 8 proper paths and all of the various divisions and powers that one gains with those 37 branches of enlightenment, those are also shared by hearers and solitary realizers. But here, besides the Buddha, there is no one who taught this meaning of dependent origination, having actualized thusness or suchness. So the Buddha alone is superior to all of these other types of beings for this teaching on dependent origination.
Oh yeah, 大家提醒你温度在呢，提醒点用过程度送巴士，提醒你温度在吧，小孩子，我是不是到吧咱马云吧？ 是吧？提醒你，你养他是个提醒你，他那人没当有出去两把下呢，提醒他了两把交心都，你那人没当有出去两把交心都，你点就个天，你送把的三千马东把了原马的，是提醒你温度在吧是提醒你温度在吧是。 提醒你了，那人没当出去，两把下心都，俺的点就个听送吧。
No. So here in the Tibetan commentary, it then says that like the Buddha has actualized suchness. So here it's not just that a Buddha has entered into meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, but that from that state of meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, he's able to teach this very meaning of dependent origination. So that is superior to any of these other types of beings listed, because it is only a Buddha who is able to then simultaneously, from that state of meditative equipoise, teach this meaning of dependent origination as he has realized it.
Oh yeah, 但你我上些几天都全部各玩样，俺听你演的是各玩样，你话出的是上些几天都全部各玩，上些几天都全把你，俺身边，俺你们把它写起这把出吧，东完了出个起义了。 提醒你多么心，提醒你了，这玩意儿破呢是，俺提身边那么了，俺太困难你就提醒你两把么多么心，身边呢提醒你空头区别给，俺他们了这玩意儿破呢，那他们了呀这玩意儿破呢，朗多人呢，东把这马云把给，东啊吃个些哇。 东啊，吃个塞瓦当，对吧？去主要说明尼呗，明尼吧马赛，咱们现在白讲是不是找去明尼吧？确实是，但是是吧？就那么对吧？去没出息，所以东啊吃个没事了，你就多把钱了，泡明尼，请你点吧出吧，就送他几把钱，他都行吧的，啊。
Then that establishes this first point that the Buddha is superior to other teachers. And then secondly, the second point is established. And the second point is that the Buddha came to the world in order to free sentient beings. And so therefore, aside from, if one throws out teaching suchness or leading beings to suchness, there's no way that a Buddha can remove suffering with his hands or like wash away our sins, our negativities with water. So other than by teaching this, by teaching dependent origination and emptiness, suchness, is the Buddha able to cut the root of samsara for us. So here, there is no way besides giving teachings, instructions on suchness, on emptiness, that the Buddha is able to liberate other sentient beings. There's no way that he can just remove their suffering with his hands or wash away their negativities, but rather it is through teaching them this path, the path of dependent origination and realizing suchness, that the Buddha is able to benefit other sentient beings. So here the second point is established, that the main purpose for the Buddha's coming into the world was to teach dependent origination, such that to benefit other sentient beings. Through that power of compassion, he wishes to benefit sentient beings, but it is only by teaching of the Dharma that the Buddha is able to liberate other beings.
Oh yeah, that is 다른 아방어에 되라. 이왕 아방어에 되라. 어느 동바된 중부터 송주 송화당. 뒤 투여 안부 좀바 현래 쳐버도 파절라나 매방 아바당. 뒤 태바 개와 샤바 전자 숨이 변하네. 다 담보동바 된중부터 송주 송화되라. 아니 다 자와 난도 바라나. 강강见了 라래바. 제대로 하신 지도신. 送把他来也参拜，来东村的继续晒在天吧的，是吧？看看见了学说就在去冲，那第一天看这人是呢，刚刚才完呢，俺那输了说话去当，俺那俺不了说话难跟我，去难跟我扛当扛，当然个就见来见来结婚人长。 康当康，让给队长见了，其他啥来吧？与他其他啥吧？刚刚见了啥来吧？啥来吧？太当太，那啥康就见康当康了，康说了啥来吧？的军战都前年，让个我年纪什么，让心去当的，让心去准备都先了啥嘛来吧？ 让都嘛出发，是吧？我你去什么？让星期天月比天的个人啥呢？先来让马来把月把提是吧？你让先来让来把提军战组钱呢？让个我你去什么？让星期当把我们先来让马来别当我些，今天这就送把地来，也参比。 俺都下来来把东西继续的，是当你东西他地里下不去，东西没送过来，地里也咱们都下来把东西继续的没完爱的，我送几个，天天为送几部提给是，我把他们家去西当，当然他们家去找啊，俺原没去谈这几家都多不起了，是大家个谈人呀。
So then we get to the second topic, which is the actual praise, and this is divided into three subtopics. So first is identifying how he taught emptiness as dependent origination, and then secondly is how therefore then praising this as being sort of an unexcelled dharma superior to any other sort of teacher. The Buddha's teaching here establishing him as being superior to any other teacher. And then finally, an extensive explanation of why that is valid or reasonable. And so then for this first point of identifying how it is that the Buddha taught emptiness as dependent origination, we now get to this verse 5, which reads, "Whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this statement? So here, the meaning of this is that whatever sort of object we are talking about, whatever external object like forms and so forth, or internal objects such as our own sense bases and so forth, whatever there is, all of this relies upon causes and conditions. So all of these things that are reliant upon or dependent upon causes and conditions for the reason of their being dependent and contingent upon things, then they are all empty of some kind of intrinsic existence or existence by means of their own nature. So it is in contradiction for something to rely upon causes and conditions and to have a kind of nature or essence that is somehow not reliant, not contingent or dependent upon others. And so for the reason of the fact that things whatsoever depends upon causes and conditions is then empty, devoid of an intrinsic existence. And this statement of the Buddha, which is well instructed to disciples, there's nothing that could be more marvelous than that or more amazing than this instruction that is, which again is that for this reason of things depending upon causes and conditions, they must therefore lack any kind of intrinsic existence or nature.
Oh yeah, so this Kuba Tamjaji Chidan, Danga Tamjaji Zawa, Yumeji Tanzing Sena, and the Rashi Meba, Rashi Yabatang, Dene Meba, or Yata Meda, Rashi Yabadi Yata, Dene Meba, the Medache. Rashi Yabazimbadi, you be Tanzing, Dene Meba Zimbadi may be Tanzing, or Yumeji Tanzing the Jija to Dobby Chitang. 希望扩的全界是上网听你是那他让些你遇见了结巴了，安尼让些你出嘛这么呢？安尼遇见了结巴下没多吧？让些你出啊下呢？安尼遇见了结巴下通干。原上希望扩了全界的上网听你是那。当做今年没希望拿新钱的，但听完了，安尼遇见了结巴的，让些遇见了上年。安尼让些结巴真个在扩全界个就上，全界是上网听你。但是这位朝外就比过了，安尼他我们探究完了，安尼这位朝外是一个让些出外真比，这位朝外就比过了单的。 出于在我出年进行出席的些推荐，节目黄年长那样，如果我是在人的电视我的话，在推荐我，推荐可能是推荐节目是一个了，刚刚见了然来吧，在这上些起多，什么带了来准备，流动中的继续也是，看到上面期望呢，谈成情况担心吧是。 但我嘛话了说话，让些去出吧，等看对这个期望呢，谈这个情况担把切吧的，安尼让些出吧个，安尼大话的担把情感的，大话个担把切吧的，可能举荐来结吧的。 遇见了结巴，也叫让些去出吧的，让些去嘛，就那遇见了结巴，小木头把一张，遇见了结巴的，安尼他让些去出吧这边，到担把些吧个举荐的顶吧的，看住行为期望呢，谈这情况担些吧是，等着的，听你开了这吧一朝嘛的就不过，谁讲呢？安尼我开吧。 我们探究完了，俺那举荐了结巴的，我看说了见了让来呗，买得当，东北也得塞瓦，那些都，我快越找我出年去为去推荐节目工作，常那样容我是，呀，我们的去在的工作上这个人是，
So here then, by this single teaching, this single speech, then the Buddha is able to it is able to reverse or cut through simultaneously all of these wrong views, the sort of all bad views, and the root of those, which is the grasping at some kind of extreme of existence of things being intrinsically existent or being being totally non-existent, this single speech, this teaching of dependent origination, is able to eliminate both of those extremes because things are born from causes and conditions, or things are produced from causes and conditions. That eliminates their having some kind of intrinsic existence, and because they are dependently arising, they are you can't fall into this extreme of total non-existence. So by this very teaching of dependent origination, it simultaneously cuts through or removes any sort of grasping at an extreme. But for so going into verse 6, but for certain sort of childish, immature beings, by grasping at it, the childish strengthen bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. So there are those individuals in the, for example, the realists, those who hold that there is some kind of real, true existence. They believe that things are intrinsically existent, that dependent origination is intrinsically existent. So for them, they don't know how to posit any kind of existence besides intrinsic existence. So although they try to posit causes and conditions, they posit things being dependently originated. For them, that dependent origination is actually intrinsically existent. And so rather than understanding how this teaching of dependent origination can actually eliminate the extremes, they fall into an extreme. It strengthens their bondage, their grasping at these wrong views. But for those who are wise, who have the view of the middle way consequentialists, this very teaching of dependent origination is what cuts them free from the net of elaborations. And here elaborations referring to any sort of grasping at things as having intrinsic existence, as having real existence. And so for these who understand it properly, dependent origination is simultaneously able to remove the extreme of intrinsic existence, as well as because things are empty, dependently originated, this also removes the extreme of total non-existence. And so here, for those who are wise, this is able to free them from their sort of net of elaborations. But for those who are accept intrinsic existence, it actually strengthens their sort of clinging to wrong views.
Oh yeah, that didn't and you can get what I lose the song like that, and then maybe made a sell. Rashi member lose the song like that, you'll be tiny. Jidang or to send a tiny Seva. Tiny Seva. Diana Jigja to save you, don't by then you go to almost done by to my years, Gana. And then a double something. Then a double something, then you trouble. Then you tumble and then lose song like that. Or any yet than better, you got several and I told you to my ears, so they say, so don't be to my ear door. Then that the going to Kangajan Rala so I dig Zawa de Kawaresona, do you got so much of a she to anybody? Do you got so had this one idea? Madrova she to the Kashi Java Temishi, Tenny Jivi in my hands. Kashi Jan Rabam, Guyana Java Kaya, what the Rashi Java is. Tell a Jivi Rashi him of the Gujan Java Tella or around with Java Jan Shella Ramala be Java the Mares. Gujan Shella Rabate, and Rama Lebam around what to be Thomas Javares. Yella Aleka Thomas. Can't the Tony say the Pioneer, say, oh, the Tensa was the Pioneer, so, and you can't do Majoshi, yeah.
No. So here, then it says, furthermore, because things rely upon conditions, causes and conditions, this eliminates the extreme of emptiness and, the extreme of non-existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of existence. So here, this, if one properly understands dependent origination, and again, that's a subtle kind of dependent origination, then one is able to simultaneously eliminate both extremes of some kind of total non-existence, as well as this extreme of existence by means of intrinsic characteristics. So if one properly understands the dependent origination, subtle dependent origination, then one is able to simultaneously eliminate both of those extremes. And as for the source of giving instructions on dependent origination from the sutras, there are many different sutra passages that could be cited as a source for this, but here he cites the sutra of questions by the Naga king Anavatapta, and here the quotation reads, those which are produced from causes are not produced. They do not have an inherent nature of production. Those which depend on causes are said to be empty. Those who know emptiness are aware. And so here, whatever relies upon causes and conditions, then there's no way that they could have some sort of intrinsic nature of production. To rely upon another would negate that they have any sort of intrinsic self-production. And so, as it says in the next line, they do not have an inherent nature of production. So whatever it is that depends upon causes and conditions is said to be empty. And those who understand emptiness are aware. So here, whatever it is that relies upon causes and conditions, that is contingent or dependent upon others, there is no way that that thing can be intrinsically existent. And that lack of intrinsic existence is said to be emptiness.
Oh yeah, that is into 자지로인도의 가소양 아니 추당 아니 꼬마다 깬라 추당 꼬마 깬라 때나니 아니 제규와라 때네 아니 안에 이게 다 중요한 그래서 텐더에 자지 아니 꼬마라 땜발에 마이 깬지보라 마이 레레라네 마이 레레라니 이게 무슨매 다오나 카르 텐데 초점을 때네 아니 이게 다 중앙 초바 tel라 때네 나데니 이제로 영하고 좀 뭐지 세오다 되다 레레레라 맞죠마 초바 담바 이제 초바라 때네 아니 다들 인기와tam에
속바는 유연견라
초바네.
So here then, to give a quotation from the extensive Sport Sutra, this quotation says then that, so the sound of a letter comes from the movement of the tongue in dependence on the lips and the throat and the palate and so forth. So it doesn't just come from our throat alone. It doesn't just come from the palate. It doesn't come from each of those individually. So we can't sort of observe the letter in each of those parts individually, but rather speech comes in dependence upon an accumulation, a collection of conditions. And so that is undoubtedly from the power of the mind. So here it's saying that there's no way to identify the sound in each of those various sort of causes and conditions that lead to it coming about. We can't identify the sound in just the lips or in just the throat or in just the palate or something, but rather it's in dependence upon all of these conditions coming together that a sound is produced. So like that, all things are dependently originated.
Oh yeah. 다 대마세 아니 도대 좀 된데 아니 시진기 돌아서 도대 투만라 아니 최다자 맞게 봤음바 그러와 맞게 봤음바데 최다네 아니 맞게 봐 참 많이 봐 아니 라왕게 마케바 임바데 아니 좀 된데 랑기 아니 공시소니 그러와 걔는 마사 도대 투마 계속지 측강 숨바 파제 세저 매바 세그 측강 좀바 숨바 아니 계속지 측강 숨 파제 아니 가르려서는 라시지 마케바라 샤거데세 타냐도 저와요 타냐도 안에 타냐담도 저와 채만 뭐 이상 아니 저와 타냐도 무슨 바 많이 바 저와 메스 전에 아니 누가 가서 마보 송바 대다 아니 라시지 저와 매바라 공바데 좀 된데 랑기 랑가시비 도이 가서 어디 전부 라시지 마제발라고는 내 최단의 저와 매바 송소시 아니 좀 된데 랑기 아니 마제와 송민 소소 송배 그 관시 라시지 마제와라 공바데 좀 된데 랑기 송바데
So here, not only that, but there are many different passages from the sutras where it says like this, that things are unproduced. And generally, what is being referred to there is that things are unproduced by some kind of intrinsic nature. So phenomena are unarisen in that they can't arise independently or autonomously. So here, when it says that things are unproduced or unarisen, that isn't just referring to existence in general, that things are generally unarisen, but rather that they are not arisen due to some kind of intrinsic nature. And so things are generally conventionally existent. We aren't saying that they are totally non-existent, but rather that there isn't some sort of intrinsic production of things, that they lack that kind of intrinsic nature. So it is when the Buddha says that things are unarisen, this is the intention of his words. It's not to say that they're totally non-existent. So in the same vein, as needing to explain that things are unarisen in terms of having a inherently existent kind of arising or production, from the Descent from Lanka Sutra, another sutra, there is a quotation quoted here that says, "O Mahamati, or those of great mind, thinking of no inherently existent production, I said that all phenomena are not produced." So here he's saying clearly that it is with this intention of phenomena lacking some kind of intrinsic production that the Buddha said that things lack production or that they are unproduced.
Oh yeah, 대다를 주제를 기회 된중 무슨 마고장 세가라 마제와 참 송바데 나랑 신지 마제와라고나 마제와 송바고 송바데 대다기 안에 가서 라시지 마제와 안에 무슨 송장 안에 주제를 기회 된중 무슨 마고장 라시지 마제와 잠마도 라시지 매바 잠마도 주제를 기회 된중 무슨 마고장 안에 때내 주미 준전지 마제와서 아니티 라시지 마제장 때내 저와데 전주 안에 송아레세 마제와서서 때내 주미 준전지 마제와 송바 관아레세 전주 때내 주미 준전 전중기라 때내 안에 라시지 마제와 송바 관아레세
So here, with each of these examples, although he doesn't actually lay out the sort of logical syllogism for things being arisen from causes and conditions, it is due to that reason, the reason of being dependently originated, that he spoke of things not having any arising or no production. So it is because they are lacking this kind of inherent production or inherent arising that the Buddha said that things are not arising or not produced. And although the actual logical syllogism itself is not laid out, it is this reason of dependent origination that is the only reason that the Buddha is speaking of things as being unproduced. He's not speaking of them as being totally non-existent, but rather it is because things depend upon causes and conditions, because they are dependently originated, that they cannot have some kind of intrinsic production. So it is with this thought that he spoke these words.
Oh yeah, that's about Umatzawa Sherala, rabji nyudi chene rwa thambo rabji ken tapa ne sunde tawa tapa ke phaki rabji nyudi ji ani chechen soso chechen minra ba soso chene an chechen di tindu ya ani riba ya soso wa ani chechen jila ya ani gyujen la jewa da chasha la dewa da ani ya chache sora tena tazu da ribi namda tawa shera ge ani ribi namda tai be kwa ne dame tenla be choji dame tenla ba de donji tenla be ba rwa ni da chechen jila ya gyujen da ani chasha dewa da ani chache sora tena chebo la tenshi ji la yang chebo la so te ten ge chache sora tena ani dazu ji riba minra wa tai be kwa ne ra shi ji dong ba zhu ba te tham je ani da 좀 된 대지 아니 두지 안보당 삼바다 참바 아니 도대 두만에 취어삼제 규제나 차셔를 때는 나zam도 나zam당 아니 또배파 다zam도 숨비 균전지 아니 다 가서래 오지 마주바 양양 숨비 텐데 아니 리베텔 파바레 야
So here then, if one were to sort of lay this out in more detail, from the root verses on wisdom by Nagarjuna, again, throughout the 27 chapters, it takes individual sort of subject matters, beginning with conditions, an examination of conditions, all the way through an examination of views, and uses individual sort of logical reasoning in order to prove that these things cannot have some sort of intrinsic existence or inherent nature. And so using sort of one subject, he will use the fact that things rely upon causes and conditions and upon the aggregation of their parts and actions and agents and so forth. And in that way, it uses the way that things are merely imputed and so forth, many different types of reasonings in order to establish that all of this is empty of some kind of intrinsic existence. And all of this, the Buddha said, in accordance with the sort of abilities, the dispositions of various disciples. And so said this in many different sutras and so forth, showing that all phenomena rely upon causes and conditions or are dependent upon causes and conditions and their parts and so forth, and they are established as being mere appearances, mere imputations. And so for that reason then shows the way that nothing is established by means of an intrinsic nature. And this is the kind of abbreviated meaning of his speech, that through these various reasonings coming to a kind of conclusion. So it is through the various teachings of the Buddha, the sutras and so forth, that are taught in accordance with the dispositions of various disciples, that the Buddha shows through various infinite types of reasonings that things cannot have any kind of intrinsic nature or inherent existence.
Oh yeah. 다들 건도 잡아 나신 전에 차셔를 때는 나담당 안에 따담도 취비 균전지 아니 오니 모두 원래 대리바다 파바레스 오대다 안에 차셔를 때는 좀 받아 오 텐들을 때는 아니다 대다르네 아니라 대충 건도 잡아 나신 라시지 매봐 만난 다외장 직사전 도단자네 샤바자바 탐제 다 가서 공부를 하시면 받을 거나 다제차와 뒤치섬에서 도이lun茶有啊다제차와天天到就完可是我们喜欢那些钱我天天那是讲呢这啥都多单讲呢下把他们这安尼的浪的安尼来把考过过来是
So here, then all phenomena are established as being dependently originated, dependent upon parts, dependent upon being designated. They are merely mere appearances and merely designated. And for the reason of them being established as merely designated and relying upon their parts and so forth, one then recognizes that there cannot be some kind of of inherent existence or intrinsic nature that establishes them. So by this reasoning, one comes to the determination that all things lack an intrinsic existence. And on the basis of each of those individual ones, going through these various reasonings, Chandrakirti goes through this all in his commentary on the root verses on wisdom, his commentary being called Clear Words. And there, putting it together with the meaning of the sutras, he explains this exact meaning. And so one can know it well from there. But here, the point is that all of these are showing us that things are dependently designated, that they are dependent upon causes and conditions, as well as dependent upon their parts. And for that, for those reasons, they cannot have some kind of intrinsic existence.
Oh yeah,让呢，才去下边去讲话音吧，太没音吧。那现在扩张了，俺那看说的，突然不咱把现在开发的部分，下去咱们把东阿把这马占了，看出顺便去完了，谈进去嘛，点些吧。听你看了，这玩意长完毛的绝不过塞的，我的。长完毛的绝不的，我听你，听你。军舰抗毒松原是他进来的，让电记者军舰抗毒松原的松原到底，俺那提醒你了这边，他铁矿那就团了这边给落这穷啊给起哇，让就把买下，啊，让就把这身上把它都买下的，提醒你了这把给写了穷王呀，落这穷也给俺那起完了。那么这边谈这些情况，点不切吧是，他就见了结我，让谁去结我印章，俺呢就见了结我印章，俺呢让谁去结我这是，就见去嘛让谁去嘛见呢，俺呢就见了结我小木头吧给，俺呢他那么这边谈这些情况，点不切吧给，就见俺呢就见了几位单就听你是。铁矿呢，你了落街边，是当铁矿呢，你了落街边开哇，俺那我们话，这话他就大不啦，俺那那么多个茶哇，马六把街边搞的区别，出去对比，俺那我听这个出去对比，对吧的，俺那先去熊土嘛。对吧？先去熊土马桶，对吧？先去熊土马桶外是，对吧？先去熊土马桶外，对吧？是民党对吧？就把你全你就不来，是哦，全你就不来，就不你的是哦。
So here then we get to the second point, which is establishing that the teacher, the master of sages, is sort of what is the quality that makes him superior to other teachers, and praising that as unsurpassed. And so this then we can apply the meaning of the next three verses go with this. So the meaning of the sixth verse kind of was explained in the context of the last verse, but then we can actually take it as going with the next portion. So here again, this verse says, verse 6, by grasping at it, the childish strengthen bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. And since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. So that goes through halfway through verse 7. And so the meaning here is that for what reason is it these individuals who have sort of limited intelligence in terms of their being able to investigate the way that things are, by grasping at things as being truly existent, they have this things have true existence or intrinsic existence, although they are dependently originated, that dependent origination is actually intrinsically existent. And so for them, they only know how to posit dependent origination as being intrinsic existence. For them, they don't know how to understand things as lacking that kind of existence. They don't know how there could be cause and effect without there being some sort of intrinsic cause and effect. So here, where it refers to the childish, this is referring to everyone below the consequentialist school. So from the autonomous mind-only school, all those who are below that, this is actually what causes them to strengthen their bondage, their grasping at wrong views. And then for those who are who have a more expansive intelligence, those sorts of scholars who are able to understand suchness properly, for them, this is the door that cuts all nets, all sort of net of proliferations of discursive thought. So for them, this is what is able to actually eliminate any sort of grasping at extreme views, this very reason of dependent origination. So here, other teachers don't know how to see this. They don't see this very fact. And so only you, the teacher who was able to see this, really deserve this name of teacher, because others don't fully appreciate this.
Tomba Shevani, Mintumba Jubani, Anne Yamashaja Singichibo, any Chibore Serva, Tomba Shanji Chundu Madon, Tomba Shivi, Mintumbo Jubani, Chini Jubore, Dandy Shandu Madon, what Tomba Shaja Chuni days. Chibuni Yindi, Wajelani Singishin Joba Shindo, Mudu Jans, Sajadan, Sixen Lasso, La Tomba Shabani, Anne Jambo de Mode Mudijan Jambi Six, Mudijan Jambi Six, what do we say the motto? Tomba Shivaga, and a judge with Shitogu Amari. Jambi, what do you see, you know?
No. So here, then, because of
the Tomba said any senior people giving in a Kogamada, the Tomba Jumdan Kogorma.
No. So here, this. Because of seeing this way, this method that is able to cut all of the elaborations, this teaching of the teacher does not appear, is not seen in any other texts. And so only you, here referring to the Buddha Shakyamuni, not just any teacher, but not just any virtuous spiritual friend, but you, referring to the Buddha himself, deserve this title of teacher. And then it gives an example. To call anyone else this title of teacher would be like calling a fox a lion. For a Tirthika, for a non-Buddhist, and it lists some various type of non-Buddhist teachers, to call them a teacher would be like a word of flattery. It wouldn't be genuine praise, but just trying to flatter them. So here, where it is referring to you alone are the teacher, this is referring to Shakyamuni Buddha, because it was only he who was able to realize this method of dependent origination. And so to call anyone else, like a non-Buddhist, a teacher would be a word of flattery, like calling a fox a lion.
Oh yeah, that didn't. What is do we see in North? The name of Dumba Yama Macho Yamaka. And then you do what did you listen with? Dumbatella Daza, said Emma was your one and what I would take. Ani Dumbatini, and the Duzana, and the Tarbelam Dumbatang. 아니 시바 코와다 시와 아니 체배 냥데라 아니 냥데지 집발에 쪄와다 아니 내가 당 차당 땡지 대화라 푸지 땡지 대화라 쪄와다 아니 체마와 남지 초 아니 땡지 제와 숨비 땜바텔라 아니 다자차 스타딩 바래 다차로
No. So so that would be a word of flattery for a non-Buddhist teacher. And here, then going into the 8th verse, it begins with this mao. So it's like we've just translated it into English as wondrous. So this is a word of wonder, sort of expressing amazement. And so wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous savior. I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination. And so here, this first, where it says wondrous teacher, the teacher teaches the path to liberation. And here, where it says wondrous refuge, this is because the Buddha is able to protect from the fears of samsara and nirvana, from that extreme of peace as well. And then he's able to give happiness, both in a temporary kind of sense as well as the ultimate sort of happiness. Because he is the speaker of Dharma, this is supreme among sort of speech, is this speech of dependent origination. So for that reason, to that teacher, I prostrate. So the verse ends then again, I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination.
Prayers after teaching, short version on page 13, and then go to page 16. Saji Bogi Juji Do Dra